and prosecutions and entire elections overturned, such as in Bridgeport, Connecticut, my old hometown. A lot of questions have surfaced, and one of them is, what can we all do to make a difference to police for voter integrity and election integrity? Our next guest has jumped into that void. He found it and is the president of the Voter Reference Foundation, which has managed to get those voter files in more than 36 states, or nearly 36 states, public, so you and I can go check and make sure there's no fake people on. That is an incredible accomplishment. Joining us now, as I said, the founder and president of the Voter Reference Foundation, Doug Truax. Doug, good to have you on.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
This is such a labor of transparency. Buying these voter files, getting them up is no small task. Almost 2/3 of the country now potentially accessible to the American people. That's amazing. Tell us the benefit and what some people are starting to do to use these databases.
Right, so it's accessible to anybody at voteref.com. So Voter Reference Foundation is the organization, and voteref.com is where you can go to see your state. We have a big map up there right away that tell you which states of the 34 that we've got up there. We're on our way to 50. But what you can do is you can go in and pull down your precinct where you live and say, I'm going to go check my addresses around here and say, why are there 4 people registered at this PO box? Why are there a bunch of people registered at this lot over here? And that's actually been going on. I would say it's a curiosity sometimes for people to go, I want to see if my neighbor next door is a Republican or Democrat. I tell you, that's a lot of it right out of the gate. But I can tell you too, there's a lot of people out there that are very much into this, like the voter integrity groups in different counties. It's kind of like a outgrowth of like the Tea Party movement and all that super conservative people that are really interested in election confidence, and they pull that information down and they go check it themselves, and then they start interacting with their county election officials, who are the ones who can start to fix the voter rolls. And I think a lot of times it's just been neglect, or maybe nefarious in some cases, depending on where you live, that people are, election officials are letting the voter files just contain all these names that they're dead people, they've moved, whatever else. And so, I grew up politically in Chicago, so I know how this works, right? You just know that somebody's on the voter file that's really not going to vote, and you send somebody else through there and tell them, they say that's who they are, and they just do that. And you can cycle through a lot of people that way. And elections are close now, very close, and we want to make sure in our country we've got 100% confidence in our election system. Otherwise, that's a bad outcome. So that's what we're working on.
Tip O'Neill used to say all politics is local, and there's nothing like local eyes to spot a suspicious address or a person they know is dead. It's such a brilliant idea. Congratulations for doing it.
It is. And I want to ask you about what the next step is, because, we always hear if you see something, say something. So if somebody sees that, like you said, there's 4 people voting out of this P.O. box, and I know that people aren't living inside that little, 10 by 4 by 4 box, what do they do at that point? Do they reach out to their state rep?
Yeah, that's right. So it's all the elections generally are county elections. There's county election officials, and so that's really where it begins. You can go to your county election office and say, hey, I've got this problem, I found this thing, I need some help with this. And there's ways to basically submit your request, and then they'll have to go and start looking through it. Now, I would tell you this, a lot of times they say, depending on who it is, if it's a Democrat county in some cases where they're not that interested in it, it's going to take some effort. And we've got people putting a lot of effort into this now, and the steady drumbeat of, hey, this is wrong. And where we want to get this to, it's just like any situation where you have full transparency. It's like you make a deposit in your bank account, you get on your app, and the money is right there. So we have the technology that we could get to a place eventually. They're doing great work in Ohio. Secretary of State Frank LaRose there. We're basically trying to get to real time. Somebody moves, it changes right away. Somebody dies, it changes right away. Somebody votes, it changes right away. So people can see exactly what's happening in real time as you go forward in an election. That's real transparency. And then you wouldn't have to have all these situations where people are showing up with their attestations that, hey, this is wrong, I need to do this. So we'll get there eventually. I think that's where we're trying to pressure these county and state election officials to get to that place, because the technology exists. We just have to have the effort on behalf of the grassroots. And so this is where they get that ability, as they go on voteref.com and start interacting with it and pull those lists. And it really is it's like what you said, crowdsourcing transparency into the voter files, what's happening nationwide.
That's a historic effort, and congratulations for taking on, because it's going to have long dividends for the American public. I want to turn to what Congress can do. There's still a lot of issues that are weighing out there. An all-Republican Congress, it made promises during the election it would try to get some voter integrity into federal law that's missing. If you had to put your crystal ball into action for a second, where do you think there's some potential consensus for some federal legislation that might change and improve the integrity of elections nationwide?
Yeah, I think one of the main places we need to head towards is UOCAVA, which is the overseas voting.
Yeah.
That is, you can only do it on federal elections, and so you have these situations where the standards for people voting from overseas are just horrific. I mean, you would not like to hear the stories that I've heard about some of these ballots that come in and they get counted in these federal elections if you just say you live in the state. And so that's an area where we've been looking at over time to say, well, if somebody were to cheat, and let's just, I also run Restoration of America. We do a lot of work in elections, and we put a lot of people on the ground in Philly and across the country. And so it's like, how do you keep people from cheating when you know what they're going to do? Well, you put a lot of poll workers and poll watchers there and things like that. But this UOCAVA piece, it kind of just lands at these county election offices, and it's not real, it's not tight, to say the least. And so that is one area in particular that we should take a look at. And also, I think too, military voting. I served, and I know when I was in the Army, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes how it works. And so more attention there for sure, but definitely the overseas piece. And I think we want to, when the Democrats got in power, the HR 1 was the first step of like a full federal takeover of the elections. We don't want that. Love the Constitution, state by state, but we can still put a lot of pressure on the states as we go forward, as people in the state realize that, gosh, my state's not that good at voter integrity. I'm going to make some noise, and that's how it works. Groundswell over time. But the federal officials can, the congressional districts and everything, they can help a ton just working inside their state and working with their state election and county election officials as well.
Well, and if you get this done in all 50 states, I think that sends a message to Congress as well as far as the support behind it. How do you drag those remaining states across the finish line?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So we had a problem with New Mexico. So ironically, I'm from New Mexico. I grew up there, and the rumor is I came back 17 years later with a federal lawsuit. And so we had to take those guys to court because the New Mexico Secretary of State said, oh no, you can't do this, and criminal felonies and things like that. So this was a strange time, and we just said, we're going to push through and do this anyway. And we took her to court, and we won in federal court. Very long opinion, like a 200-page opinion, because the judge was very careful about how he addressed the fact that these are public records, okay? Even though states say, well, that's private information and we don't want to have that out there, it's not real, okay? This is taxpayer dollars that paid for all this. People deserve to see the voter file because that's the truth of the transparency and democracy. So we won that federal lawsuit. And so we still are having, Indiana just got up, which is great. Surprised it took so long. I'm glad they did. It was, that's a red state and they were struggling. But the Dakotas are difficult, lots of blue states still. But once we won this federal decision, it put everybody on notice that you can say what you want, but we will take you to court and we will win. So now it's just a matter of time before we get all 50 states up. A lot of legal battles, a lot of effort, a lot of money goes into this thing, and so people want to support it. Voter Reference Foundation is the place to go to support it. But we're on our way to all 50, and it'll be a new day for election transparency in this country when we get there. I just don't know exactly when, but it's going to happen.
What you and Dick Uline and all the great folks at Restoration have done has made a huge difference. We're all going to be able to help make us a better election system in the future because of the groundwork you've laid, Doug. Congratulations. Folks, everybody go to voteref.org and go check it out. It's an amazing resource. I check it often now. I love it. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, the media is fretting about RFK Jr. among many other things, right? Are any of those concerns valid? Well, we'll talk to the wellness company's great doctor, Peter McCullough, one of my favorites. Next, right after these messages.